Okay, so when we say solve the equation, so we give an equation like this, 3w squared plus 22w equals negative 7. What does solving the equation mean, or finding the roots? What does that actually mean? Jordy?
Finding the zeros.
Finding the zeros, sort of in this case. We can make it look like finding the zeros. What does it mean in general when we say solving for something?
Factor.
Not quite factor. What does solving equation mean in grade 9? When you said x minus 3 is equal to 6. What does solving that equation mean?
Finding the value of the variable.
To do what?
To be able to plot.
What does it imply when I find that value of x?
To make the equation true.
Thank you. Yeah, we want the value of x to make it true, right? So here we also mean roots, and how we tie that to quadratic equation. We don't have a quadratic equation here, like y equals something, but that applies to what Jordan said before, is when we apply that to a quadratic equation, right? That's when we're finding when y is equal to 0, the x-intercepts. So here we need to find the value of w that makes this equation true. So one way that we could try to do this. Christian.
Make one side of the equal sign 0.
Okay. So how do we do that?
So just the 0 equals 3w squared plus 22w plus 7.
Okay, so you're gonna add 7 to both sides,
Yeah.
right? We'll go adding 7 to both sides to get rid of that, to make that 0. Plus 7 is equal to 0. Why is it special when we have something equal to 0? What special thing can we try to do when something's equal to 0? What does that mean, though? Finding the zeros. X-intercepts, but what special thing can we do when something's equal to 0? What's special about that equal to 0? As opposed to it being to negative 7.
You can just use another formula for it.
What do you mean by another formula?
You can solve it by factoring.
Yeah, so we break it down into factors, and if it's equal to 0, then any one of those factors equal to 0, and my solution is equal to 0. So sort of what we talked about last time, where a bunch of stuff we multiply together, if any one is 0, then our answer is 0. So the nice thing about our answer being 0, if we could factor it, we could do that as well. Another way we could try to do this is we could try to complete the square as well. So I taught last class, if we try to complete the square, then you could also get your plus and minus values when you have a square root. The tough part about that is, well, because we have a 3 in front of the w squared, we can't just take 22 divided by 2 and square it, right? The only way we could use that formula that we had was only if the coefficient from the variable that's being squared is 1. So in order to make it 1, we have to do like 22 divided by 3, and then we get into fractions, which might be tricky. So my first look at this is, if I can factor this, awesome. If not, then I have to go complete the square. Okay? Does that make sense? Why maybe not want to try completing the square to begin with?
Yeah.
Okay?
Can we go over that after?
Sure. So we can factor this. How can we factor this? So we have the product. So what product are we looking for? How do we get our product?
3 times 7.
Yeah, so we take 3 times 7. 3 times 7, so our product would be 21. And what's our sum? 22. So what two numbers multiply to 21 add to 22?
21.
Positive 21 and 1, right? Positive 1. So now we could break down our 22 to be 21w plus w plus 7 is equal to 0. Okay? So the whole idea of that, getting those two numbers, was I could break down 22 to 21w plus w. Then factor by decomposition. In that term, we factor out a 3w. So I'm left with w plus 7. And here I want to factor out just a 1. I'm left with w plus 7 is equal to 0. And I'm left with w plus 7 equals 3w plus 1. Okay, am I done? Yeah. So a lot of, we may be tempted to leave this y factored. I did the hard part. Woo. Answer the question. No. We want those roots. We want those values of x, or in this case, values of w, that make it to 0. Right? So we have to go off and solve these two equations. So we have w plus 7 is equal to 0, or 3w plus 1 is equal to 0. So we have w plus 7 minus 7 is equal to 0, minus 7, so w is equal to minus 7. And here we have 3w is equal to minus 1, so w is equal to minus 1/3. I get w twice there. Let me break this down a little more. 3w is equal to minus 1, divide both sides by 3. So w is equal to minus 1/3. Okay? So those, therefore, my two zeros are my roots, or the roots are 7, -7, and -7, and -1/3. Okay, so we can try to complete the square. I'll do that on a new page. Did this last time.
Have you seen this?
Okay, so how can we try to complete the square on this one? This.
You bring over this 7.
Okay, we could bring over the 7, right? But we're just looking for a value over here to add. Right, so I'm going to rewrite this as 3w squared
Oh,
plus
we already did.
22w is equal to minus 7. Okay,
Oh, okay.
so we deal with the equation. But what's the difficult part here, figuring out what the value here is to complete the square? What's the challenge?
3 times
Sorry?
3, -7.
Well, it's this 3 here that's tripping this up. Right? 3 is not a perfect square. Right? And because it's not 1, we just can't take 22 divided by 2 and square it. That formula, that trick, only works when w squared, or x squared, or variable squared, the coefficient is 1. Okay? So how can we make that 1?
3w. Or we factor it.
Yeah, so we just force out a 3. We'll factor over 3.
And w.
Well, we want to keep the w, okay? Because we still want a quadratic equation
Okay.
in our brackets, right? So yeah, normally we tend to factor out the w because we're used to the whole greatest common factor. We don't want to do that for completing the square though, because we want to keep that variable squared so that we're still dealing with quadratic. So that's 22 over 3w is equal to minus 7. So now, how do we figure out which values to add or subtract to make this or subtract to make this a complete square? Dale?
I just have a question.
Mhm.
To find the value add, do you still do 22 divided by 2 squared? Or you do 22 over 3 divided by 2?
Yeah, so basically because now the coefficient in front of w is 1, we can go back to that trick, right? So 22 divided by 3, so we want to go 22 divided by 3, take that divided by 2, and we want the whole thing squared. Okay? So this comes up to 22 over 6 quantity squared. We can reduce the 22 over 6 to 11/3 squared. So that gives us 121 over 9. So now you see why we go off to complete the square. this was doing it a little bit harder. And I think Amy was doing it. Right.
What did you do the first step?
Why did I do the first step? Well, I took this and divided by 2. Right here, yes. So I took 22 over 3, divided by 2, or basically multiplied by half. Right? So I got 22 over 6. Now I need to square that. But before I squared it, I just simplified it. 11 over 3.
Why did you multiply by half?
It's the same as
Big same divide by 2, right? I just don't want to do 22 over 3 and then divide by big 2 because then it looks confusing. So yeah, dividing by 2 is saying same thing as multiplying by half. So now we go off and dealing with fractions. In the end, did you get the same answer, Amy? Really? Man, I gotta work through this now? I gotta deal with fractions? So now I have to do, so I have to add 121 over 9. Because I'm adding it, I need to subtract it as well to keep it 0. Okay?
Oh, it's Hong Kong. It's Thailand.
So now this is same as 3SW plus 22 over 6, which is same as 11 thirds.
What have you done?
Minus 121 over 9 is equal to minus 7. Okay? Now I have to distribute the 3 across, so I get 3W plus 11 over, it's not 11 over 3.
And this is very.
No, it's 11 over 3. 11 over 3, 20 squared, minus, well, 3 times 120 over 9. I could reduce that, so it's basically 121 over 3. It's a negative 7.
So this is not very practical.
No, so I think that once you see to this point, it's like, yeesh, it's hard to complete the square on here.
It would have been easier if there was no 3, right?
It'd be easier if there's no 3, or it'd be easier if this was like 21W, right? Basically, if we factor this out and we still had a whole integer there, then it's a lot easier to do with. The fact that we factor out 3 with 22, it leaves us with a fraction, and then we deal with a whole bunch of things with fractions.
Can you turn it into 21W? Magically?
No, there's no magic way of doing that. Okay?
Like add 1W, subtract 1W.
You're still stuck with the W, you can't get rid of that. Although, you know what? I'm not saying it's not possible, it hasn't been discovered. So you want to think about it somewhere else?
You get a math
You might have a new
PhD.
formula. Okay? So anyways, we go through those steps, eventually we get the same roots. Alright? Yes, Dale?
Is it a coincidence that it equals -7 and that -7 is one of the roots?
I mean, yes, it's a coincidence.
And like on a test or quiz, will it ever specifically say solve this equation by completing the square?
You might. So we might ask for a explicit way to solve it, or it might just say solve the equation, and it's up to you to decide.
Either factoring or by square.
Okay? So any questions with that example? Did you get the same answer now? Thank you, Amy, for doing all the work. So the moral of the story is, if you do it this long way, you do all the fractions, you will get the same answer. Obviously, one took a little bit longer, right? So that's what we asked the other day. Which one is better? It's hard to say. Like if I have a non-one coefficient from my variable squared, and I can't take it out of the variable with just the non-squared, then I'm dealing with fraction. That's a lot harder to do. So you might want to try to factor. Okay? Any questions on that?
So is that the new unit?
No, that's just
the
a review.
revamp.
So what we're going to talk today about is the quadratic formula. This is one of the formulas that you will have to memorize. It will be very beneficial if you memorize. What I want to do in hopefully the next 10 minutes to 15, and what the other video was about, is basically where does the formula come from? Okay?
Dun, dun, dun.
So we have an equation.
A history lesson.
So we have a quadratic that's of this form, right? Most quadratic equations be of this form. What's this form called?
Vertex. No.
We do not have the vertex, so it's not vertex form.
Factor form.
Is it factors, a bunch of things multiplied together?
Oh,
Standard.
Standard form. Alright. So most quadratics you're given.
so it's from last year.
No, we learned this.
Wasn't it
Plus
like
C.
y equals mx plus b, except it was in like.
So you're given it in standard form. Okay? So we want to solve for this. This Gravel, give me hints. I'll help around this problem. Solve. So we talk about solving for a quadratic equation. What are we looking for? What are we looking for? Yeah, so we're looking for the roots or the x-intercepts. So here, 0 is equal to a x squared plus bx plus c.
Is there like the bonus homework question?
Yes.
I could get it.
Actually, you're going to switch it around. Write it on that side.
Whoops.
Okay.
That's all we could do.
So what I want to try to do is, well, it's hard to factor this, so I'm going to try to complete the square. Okay? So in order for me to complete the square, what's in front of my x squared?
A.
A. So I need to try to get rid of that a somehow, so I could use my little trick to try to complete the square. So how can I get rid of the a?
Divide.
I could divide by a or factor by a, right? What happens if I divide by a? So basically I multiply both sides by 1 over a. Or am I still left off on the right side?
One
I'm still left with 0,
Zero.
right? 0 multiply anything is still 0. What am I left with here?
X squared plus bx
Oh, now it's on the negative. So you made more a's by trying
plus
to
c
remove
over
one,
a.
right?
Yes, so I made a bunch of a's by trying to remove the a, but we need to remove that a,
Multiply by a.
so to try to complete the
Simple.
square. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, well, I just want to work with this part for now. So how can I isolate for that part?
Ask me.
How can I isolate for just this part here?
Multiply by
or subtract.
We'll subtract, right? So subtract, so I get x squared plus b over a x is equal to minus c over a. Now how do I complete the square? How do I complete the square on this side? How do I try to complete the square on that side?
One half of b.
So yeah, b over a, you need to divide that by 2 or multiply by half. So I'm going to do that on the side over here. So b over a, I need to multiply that by half. Same thing as divide by 2. And what do I have to do with that value? Square it. So that's equal to b over 2a squared, right? So I'm just multiplying b times 1 gives me b. A times 2 just gives me 2a. If I square that, I get b squared is equal to 4a squared. So I have to add that to both sides now. So x squared plus b over a x plus b over 4a squared is equal to minus c over a. I need to add the same thing over here, plus b over 4a squared. Okay? You okay with that part so far? Any questions on that? It's a little bit complicated. I'm missing a square somewhere. Oh! Yes, thank you. I'm missing a b squared. Oh, I did right there, I just didn't copy it properly. I need a lesson on copy. Okay? So the whole idea of me trying to get this was now I can specify this as a binomial squared. So that's x plus b over 2a quantity squared. Right? So basically it's x plus this value that I have over here, quantity squared, is equal to, now I'm going to try to simplify the right hand side. So my common denominator here is going to be,
36.
4a squared, b.
yeah, my common denominator is going to be 4a squared, right? So I'm going to be adding a b up here. And with the negative c, what do I have to do to negative c over a to get that common fraction? Get that fraction like that. Jordan?
Times by negative 4a. Or no, times by 4a.
Just by 4a, right? Because I multiply the bottom by 4a to give me 4a squared. So I need minus 4ac up here. I need to multiply by by 4a. Did I forget the square again? Thank you.
Other people should be using.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing this on purpose.
You guys are sleeping.
Right? So now we got minus 4ac plus 4b squared all divided by 4a squared on one side, x plus b over 2a quantity squared on the other. How can I isolate for x now? What's that thing that we want to do? Thank you, Christian. So we take the square root of both sides. Actually, before I even ask this now,
Slight resemblance.
can I tell what my axis of symmetry is over here?
Negative.
Mm.
If I look at this, can I tell what my axis of symmetry is?
Hope not.
Yes.
You can.
How? No, wait. I don't know how.
Well, what's the x-coordinate of the vertex? When we had a quadratic equation of vertex form, y is equal to a x minus d quantity squared plus c, right? What was the vertex of that? D and C. In other words, what's the axis of symmetry? What's the axis
B
of
over
symmetry?
2a.
So what? Well, the first one, what's the axis of symmetry?
D.
D.
X equals D, right?
So plus B over 2a.
So we're seeing something similar developing over here. We have that x something plus or minus something quantity squared. So from here, we can see that the axis of symmetry x is equal to minus b over 2a. And we got that from this part over here. The thing that's in the square part in the brackets, that's telling us what the axis of symmetry is. So I'm going to kind of highlight that. So back to the other thing. So Christian said we take the square root of both sides. So I'm kind of messy now. So I get x plus b over 2a is equal to the square root of minus 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. Is that right?
Maybe.
You know, that's a loaded question.
Do we have to know this?
Well, the square root of this is what? Well, it's still x plus b over 2a, right? So the square root of this answer? How many answers does the square root have?
Oh.
Sorry, how many answers?
2.
2, right? It always has a positive value and a negative value, right? I know, I'm making you think, Christian.
I think this is true.
So what we could do here is
Count that.
x plus b over 2a is equal to plus or minus, I have the minus 4ac plus b squared over the square root of 4a squared. So I could take that square root and just apply it to the numerator, apply it to the denominator. So x is equal to plus or minus the square root of minus 4ac plus b squared. So what's the square root of 4a squared? 2a. Good job. Plus or minus?
Plus.
But since we have a plus or minus here, it doesn't matter. Okay, so we don't need to re-specify again. We're just flipping those plus minus to a plus minus.
Then we don't have to put in brackets.
Put one in brackets.
Okay.
This thing here?
Okay.
Question, Jordan?
Can you take the b squared out of the square root or no?
No, because we're adding it, right? If this was minus 4ac times b squared, then we could, like, we can't even take the 4 out because we're having addition in it,
Okay.
right? So it's the same thing when we had what was a good example? When we did the exponent law. So really, okay, underneath the covers, a square root is to the power of 1/2. You'll learn that next year, okay?
Oh.
Square root is really to the power of 1/2. So really, you're applying the exponent laws, and because we're having addition in here, you can't break it up. Okay? So you have to keep that square root under all that minus 4ac plus b squared, all has to stay under square root. But we can separate between the numerator and denominator. It's the same thing with exponent laws, right? When we have 2/3 to the power of 3, we could the same thing as 2 to the power of 3 over 3 to the power of 3. We could break that up to numerator and denominator. So how do I isolate for x here now?
Subtract b. It's a 2a. Subtract
B over 2a? Good. So if x is equal to, I'm going to subtract b over 2a from both sides. So this is, let me write this. Minus b over 2a plus or minus the square root of minus 4ac plus b squared all over 2a. Can I simplify what's on the right even more?
Yeah.
How come?
Would you write down? I'll see it.
They're the same.
Negative 4.
So this is minus b over 2a plus or minus the square root of 4ac plus b squared. All that's square root of over 2a.
What's left of 2a?
Yeah, they both have a common root of 2a, right? So I could just rewrite this whole thing as x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of minus 4ac plus b squared all over 2a. So that is your quadratic formula.
Yeah.
When do we learn it?
You just did. Now memorize it.
That is.
So
Okay?
this is the answer to everything.
I have 2 areas where I'm
So basically the roots of any quadratic equation standard form is you just take your a, b's, and c's, plug it into this formula, and you get your roots. So if we took this previous question, rewrote it in standard form, which we did over here. So here a was 3, b is 22, c is 7. We go back and plug that into this equation over here, we will get the same answer. Do it?
Picture didn't happen.
How are you challenging me? Let's see if I can do it. So we had 3w squared plus 22w plus 7 is equal to 0. So here a is equal to 3,
is 2a.
b is equal to 22, c is equal to 7. Right? So what's my quadratic formula again?
I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 2a.
Minus b plus or minus the square root of 4a, sorry, minus 4ac, right? Minus 4ac
Wait. Oh, never mind. You can do it either way. Okay, is it easier to do plus b squared minus 4ac or negative 4?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I guess I could have done it other way.
Kind of.
So Jordan likes to do it this way.
The Jordan way.
B squared minus 4AC all over 2A.
Okay.
Actually, I like that form better. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, me too.
According to, we'll call it the Jordan way.
I'll write it down.
JW.
Can we remember the Jordan way instead?
So X is equal to minus B. So what's B here?
22.
Minus 22.
Whoops.
Plus or minus the square root of. So B is again 22
Yeah.
squared minus 4. A is 3. What's the value of C? 7.
Oh, you see how fast he showed it?
Nice.
All over 2 times A was 3. So here with X is equal to minus 22 plus or minus.
Sorry, I'm getting many times.
Whew. What's 22 squared?
Math question. I got
doesn't
the
matter.
answer.
What's 22 squared?
484.
484.
Yeah.
Why can't you just write 23?
And 21 times 4 is.
84.
Thank you.
84. I said first.
All over 6.
6.
So X is equal to negative 22 plus the square root, plus or minus the square root of 400.
525,000.
Right? So 484 minus 84 is 400. All over 6. So X is equal to minus 22 plus or minus square root of 400 is
20.
20.
You said 10.
Wow.
I was gonna say 200.
That's 100.
So X is equal to minus 22
-1/3.
plus 20 over 6. Or X is equal to minus 22 minus 20 over 6. So here X is equal to minus 2 over 6. It's equal to minus 1/3. Here X is equal to, what's minus 22 minus 20?
-42 divided by 6.
Minus 42 over 6, which is equal to minus 7.
Yeah, those numbers are familiar.
Yeah, I like my.
Can we try this with another question?
Okay.
Almost took us like 2 hours.
So the thing is, yeah, this is pretty complicated, right? A lot of numbers plug in, do a lot of square roots and stuff like that. You know, taking the square of 22, I'm not a fan of, right? So that's why the other way, if we could factor this, would be awesome. If you would try to complete the square, right, with those nice numbers, it would be nice. But sometimes none of those work. We get down to this formula. So find the roots of this equation.
Do we have to use the new way? Or
Well,
don't do that?
let me tell you this. What two numbers multiply to 15 but add up to 14?
13 1.
Multiply to 15, add up to 14.
15 1.
No.
15 and 1 add up to 16 last time I checked.
15 negative 1.
But that multiplies to negative 15.
You take out
Nothing
negative.
does.
Nothing does, right? We can't factor this one over integers.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
So we could try to complete the square, but my coefficient from the x squared is 3.
Oh my.
It's not going to divide to 14 nicely.
Oh.
So let's
I'm gonna
just
work on that new method that I have to go discover now.
minus b plus. So minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So x is equal to, so what's my value of b here? 14. So minus 14 plus or minus the square root of 14 squared minus 4. Value of a is
3.
the value of c is
Do we have to memorize that like the thing there?
which thing?
B negative. Yeah.
You have to memorize this formula because I can't. Well,
Well, we can like work on it every time we get it.
you could derive it yourself because we went through that. So you could derive it yourself, or you can just memorize it.
Okay.
Then 2 times a is 2 times 3. So we have x is equal to minus 14 plus or minus, this was square root, sorry, what's 14 squared?
196.
Thank you,
Nice.
196. Minus 4 times 3 is 12 times 5 is 60. All over 6. So x is equal to minus 14 plus or minus 196 minus 60 is 136. All over 6.
Can we be given this formula on the first?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
You can't do that, can you?
On the first quiz.
On the
You need to start memorizing. You know what? Once you do your homework, once you will do your homework,
I love homework.
it won't be hard to
The
memorize.
reason's not easy, but how to do this?
Math
So
homework
square
is
root,
the worst.
What's the square root of 136? We want exact answers.
12 and a half. I don't know. 11 and a half.
How do we determine which one's A, B, and C?
11 and 3
Well,
quarters.
A is
Over.
The square.
the value in front of x squared, B is the front of the x, and C is your constant. So what's 136 divided by 4?
I can definitely. 8. 30. What?
34.
I know.
34.
Is it divisible by 4?
34.
136 is there.
34?
C.
What's
8.
no? It's not divisible by 6.
So I can give you a little lesson on how you can reduce radicals,
It's not divisible
or simplify radicals. So this is the same as x equals minus 14 plus or minus. So what did you say? Square root of what's 136 divided by 4? 34?
But isn't it divided by 6 though?
Oh.
Not 4.
So I can rewrite that as 4 times 34 over 6. Thing is, I can take the square root of 4 now. What's the square root of 4? 2. So I can rewrite this as minus 14 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 34 all over 6. And that's your final answer.
How do you choose 4 though?
I chose 4 because I know 4 is a perfect square. And I was hoping to divide it to 136.
So if you find. Oh, okay.
Right? You kind of guess, that's the thing with simplifying radicals, it's a little bit hard, you have to just try and reduce it to perfect squares.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you just leave it like this.
So you just leave it like that, x is equal to negative 14 plus or minus. Another way you could try to rewrite this as well, you could say x is equal to negative 14 plus 2 root 34 over 6. Or x is equal to negative 14 minus 2 root 34 over 6. So either or, you can specify your answers either way. Right, I would tend to just leave it like this one, the plus and minus thing. This is just coming off the
That's
quadratic
14.
equation.
One.
Quadratic formula.
Whoa, that was fun.
Now if I ask you to specify this to 2 decimal places,
Oh. What's that?
then you actually have to pull out your calculator, figure out each of these.
I don't believe in calculator.
It's against my religion.
Can we just leave it like that?
It depends what the question asks you. Right? If it asks for an exact answer, then you just leave it like that. If the question says something about nearest decimal places, then you need to take the square root.
This is was B.
Oh my gosh, but wow.
Wait, I'm.
Yes, homework!
So
Got
key
it.
concepts. This is the key concepts.
Oh, jokes. Key concept.
X equals.
For y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c.
Why did you do 4 times 36 back there?
Why did I do that? Well, because I saw that 136, I was hoping it would be divisible by 4. And if it's divisible by 4, then I can take the square root of 4, which gives me 2.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm leaving the 34 in there because I can't reduce that or I can't simplify that radical anymore. So when we have a quadratic in standard form, y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, axis of symmetry, is x is equal to what?
E.
That, you guys didn't highlight it when I highlighted on the whiteboard?
I got
The
this
smartboard?
negative b plus or minus.
Minus b over 2a.
Oh, just add this.
I knew
Ooh. Is that
Right?
positive B or minus B?
It's minus b over 2a. So now, whereas before we couldn't determine axis symmetry unless it was in vertex form, or even when it was in factor form, we could not figure it out. But before, when it's given like this, standard form, there's no way. But now we have an equation, x equals minus b over 2a. So once we get x, can we determine the vertex? Yeah, we go back into here, plug it in, get the vertex, right? The roots are x is equal to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, so those two little equations, those two little formulas, that's what we're driving up.
We'll go back one page.
Back one page?
Jeez, missed a good lesson today.
Ooh, forties.
This page?
Oh, but you recorded it?
Okay.
You
Okay,
yeah,
no
you did.
What would your reaction be if like
I
you
did.
saw that
You
you had to
went,
start you
It's-
start recording it? If
Even
it was
if
like
it was
red,
recorded,
Yeah,
it
but
wasn't recording.
If it wasn't recorded, I said, oh well, tough for you guys.
If I say hi, Tease will be nice.
If he's listening, he will hear it.
Hi, Tease! Tease!
We go with this?
Yeah, tease.
Okay, so for homework, not too bad.
This
Yeah, but we got marketing, we have science, we have so much.
What's the
stuff.
science?
Oh, we have to like study for the
Summer
lab.
And we have a test. I'm gonna film.
So homework, cover your page 300, communicate your understanding. Question number 2, practice number 1, 2BE, 3BC, 4DE, and number 9.